Today's episode is for the interior designers of the world, to my friends and peers, people dedicated to helping make our homes beautiful symbols of self-expression. And yet, while our homes are more highly curated and designed than ever before, interior designers are going to be some of the first people to tell you that it is entirely possible for a home to look too perfect. I mean, looking around a modern home, it's easy to see design in our lives dominated by our human obsession for balance and symmetry. Symmetry pervades the precisely mathematically repeating patterns of our wallpaper and our fabrics, the mirror image perfection of our products, of our home decor, and sometimes even in some of the most basic interior design decisions. I mean, anyone else got a pair of matching nightstands? We even pursue a myth of balanced perfection in ourselves, both in our outward appearance and the pursuit of consistent speech and decisions in our lives. But stepping behind the proverbial mirror, we see our quest for symmetry as more than simple aesthetics, but rather it's an outward signal of humanity's desperate desire to reduce, organize, simplify, and perfect this beautiful world around us. And while sometimes this may make the world easier to handle, it turns out that a world of perfection is also one filled with markedly less joy, curiosity, and interest. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why symmetry doesn't necessarily equal beauty, why humans continue to seek out perfection and mirror image qualities, and what is to be gained by embracing the real world, the natural, asymmetrical world that we are actually hardwired to love and appreciate. It turns out that your home, your style, your life could very well benefit from the harmony, peace, and wonder that exists in the arrangement of things that are not in mirror balance, but in perfect harmony all the same. My name is Christopher Grant Ward, and this is Rebel Nature. I'm an award-winning artist and naturalist obsessed with the ways nature can rewire our brains and change our perception of everyday things. I'm so happy you're listening. But wait, you might be thinking, hold up, Christopher. I thought the gold standard for form, for aesthetics, and even human attractiveness and beauty, it's all about having perfectly symmetrical and angular faces, straight, clean lines and forms. I mean, this dominates the design world, right? Well, kind of. I mean, yes, there have been many studies that show that humans find more symmetrical faces in photos to be more sexually attractive. But these same studies also reveal that while some level of symmetry is necessary for attraction, perfectly or close to perfect symmetrical faces are generally perceived to be less attractive, to be plain, unemotional, and rigid. And moreover, studies have found that there's no relation between one's facial symmetry and having better genes or superior health. So the sexual selection argument really doesn't hold up. One NIH study even showed that humans prefer natural directional asymmetries in humans, that faces with slight discrepancies show more healthy emotional openness and held more charm and attraction. And there's even more visual research to confirm this. One test showed participants photos of famous celebrities known for their attractiveness, Ryan Reynolds, Zendaya, Gwen Stefani, and Kim Kardashian. You can see the photos I'm going to talk about in the show notes, but basically the test showed the celebrity's real face, and then next to it, two computer-generated mirror image composites, one that mirrored their right and then their left sides. Which of the three versions do you think viewers tended to choose as the most attractive? So it turns out, some symmetry may be required to show attraction to some degree, but a mirror-perfect symmetry just isn't natural. Attraction and our sense of beauty is a far more complex equation, especially when we are more than just photos to one another. The charming nuances of imbalance in our eyes or ears, or Harrison Ford's slightly crooked smile, these are things that we actually find quite compelling. According to an ancient Egyptian proverb, the most beautiful thing is never the most perfect. It's our unique qualities that drive deep interest in one another. The pursuit of facial symmetry may only ever create a perception of averageness, diminishing one's natural beauty. So why do we care so much about symmetry? Well, perhaps the real reason is that humans see symmetry as a form of order or organization, which we desire to help us make sense of the world. Alan Lightman says the reason must be partly psychological. He says, "We find ourselves in this strange universe, and symmetry seems to help us make sense of what we're seeing." And I can definitely accept this argument, especially in times past, especially when the world was much more chaotic, toxic, and inhospitable. In those times, it definitely made sense to simplify our homes as much as possible. And now, after millennia of treating our homes as these sort of emotional shelters, of course we would want to design our spaces to create a sense of ease and to separate ourselves as much as possible from the dangers of the outside world. But what's funny is order doesn't necessarily translate to beauty, or to calm, or to happiness, or even to relaxation. In fact, it is shown that it is the asymmetry of natural scenes that promotes more positive brain health, because it is more compelling, more complex, and interesting, and at the same time, more relaxing. If you recall in the Rebel Nature episode 3 about time, a number of studies showed that attention, focus, and satisfaction improved by as much as 25% when participants were exposed to natural environments. And this number holds even when participants just look at natural objects versus streets, industrial units, or complex geometric patterns. So it seems that perhaps the same thing that occurs in faces also occurs when we react to environments or anything. Too much symmetry, too much mirroring, too much of a grid-like consistency almost feels off-putting and at least a bit impersonal. And if that's true, then in the 21st century, with every modern convenience at our disposal, we may be taking the symmetrical curation of our living spaces a bit too far. And in true Rebel Nature fashion, I must ask, why bother when nature is so beautifully imperfect? In fact, nothing that exists in nature is perfectly symmetrical. It's not just human faces. Asymmetry is everywhere, and it's often quite exquisite. If it's not made by humans, there's a good chance it's symmetrical. In fact, the word asymmetrical in many ways is just a synonym for natural. It's just another way to describe nature's vibe. Think about all the breathtaking inconsistencies that exist in nature. No two flowers are ever quite the same. Every cloud is a miracle, and there is no mathematically repeating pattern of leaves across the yard the way there might be in my wallpaper or fabric. And so enter biophilic design. That is design that embraces and is inspired by nature with the intent to blur the lines between the indoors and the outdoors. If you're not familiar with the term, biophilic design is also sometimes described as the integration of nature into architecture and interior layouts. And to me and many other interior designers, this trend goes well beyond just using jungle-themed wallpaper or putting a bunch of houseplants around. No, it's the intentional use of natural materials, textures, and patterns, or lack of patterns, that aren't just inspired by the great outdoors, but actually come from them. Showcasing materials such as wood and stone, materials which themselves are imbued with nature's random qualities, their beautiful asymmetry and inconsistency. Biophilic design, to me, has the potential to break down this hard separation between the indoors and the outdoors, between highly curated spaces and the redemption of self, which we usually only find outdoors. One perfect example of what I believe biophilic asymmetry can do in interior design is exemplified in a hand-painted wallpaper company called Porter Telio, who has no affiliation with this podcast. I'm not supported by them. I just love the company. I worked with Porter Telio on the Pasadena Showcase House in 2023, and the photos I'm going to talk about are in the show notes as well. They developed a custom hand-painted beautiful wallpaper for my room. It was called Flora and Fauna, which is perfect. The walls of my room were filled with these large, deep purple abstract shapes suggestive of leaves or butterflies or fish, other organic abstractions. Gorgeous in form, but the real beauty was that no two shapes were alike. Each form was painted by hand with human variance and impulse and created less of a wallpaper and more of a mural of unique shapes on the walls. And I remember visitors to the room described the walls as gentle and soft, and they were drawn to them, but they weren't immediately understanding exactly what was going on. Just like clouds and trees and plants outdoors, the calmness, but also the curiosity of nature was brought into the room. And needless to say, the wallpaper was easily one of the most memorable and emotionally triggering parts of my space. If you want to check out all of Porter Telio's beautiful wallpaper, I will add a link to their website in the show notes. Of course, introducing nature into interior design is certainly nothing new. Everyone from the Egyptians to the Greeks to Renaissance artists and makers saw value in using these asymmetrical tropes, using forms and styles from biology and geology as a way to stay connected to the natural world. The Art Nouveau style of the 1890s to the 1910s is near and dear to my heart. The arts and crafts movement later as well rejected depersonalized factory industry in favor of the natural and the organic. Art Nouveau rejected the perfection of patterns and grids, instead opting for this sort of balanced, off-kilter harmony in all things. Not only that, but Art Nouveau also despised the discrimination between fine art and decorative art. They believed that all things, our everyday things, should elevate our existence and keep us connected with the natural world at all times. And of course, nature's asymmetry is a key characteristic of the Zen aesthetic in Japanese art, emphasizing the process of seeking perfection rather than perfection itself. This idea is reflected in the use of, I'm going to butcher this word, fukinsai, imbalance, as a method to control the harmony of a composition. In traditional Japanese art, asymmetrical designs and layouts are seen as more dynamic and inviting, that they evoke flow and movement, which actually leads to a better recall of the content. Zen Buddhism teaches that nature is the source for all life, and that in all things we should be joined together with nature's unique patterns. And as a side note, I need to say, of course, that biophilic design is my mission as an artist. If you don't know my work, I specifically focus on handmade, sustainable, and biophilic nature-inspired aesthetic furniture, one-of-a-kind pieces that use the forms and shapes of animals and plants in my work. My mission is to introduce my furniture as art to your room, to bring handmade wood objects into your living space as a gentle reminder to break our separation with the natural world. If you're interested, you can view my work at christophergrantward.com. The link will be in the show notes. Okay, so shameless plugs aside, I can see as I look around me that asymmetry and biophilic design are having their moment in interior design. But why? Well, design often reflects the changes that happen in our society. For example, in the Middle Ages, which are generally seen as a period of economic and intellectual decline, homes, even wealthier homes, stuck to more muted, sobering colors for their decorative tapestries and stonework. They only had practical furnishings and stone slab floors. In contrast, the Renaissance, with this renewed focus on art and passion and creativity, well, interior design followed suit with marble floors and ornate woodwork and furniture that was made only with the finest materials. Today's modern interiors may pull from any number of historical styles, colors, and motifs. However, as I mentioned, these days, asymmetry and biophilic design are having this moment. So what's happening today to cause that? Well, like the plague of the Middle Ages, the COVID pandemic will certainly be one of the defining moments of our time. It changed how we feel, how we live, how we work. Many of us don't have the same structure to our lives anymore, and we no longer see the need for that structure. We're embracing more fluid and passionate ways of living, more independent ways of working. Remote and freelance jobs are much more common than they were even 4 years ago. And as well, during the pandemic, when people couldn't interact with one another, open natural places became some of the safest havens for experiencing life outside the home. So yeah, I think people want to add nature back into their lives because, one, they see the physical and mental health benefits of nature, and two, they also saw how disconnected their lives had been from the outside world. And finally, I'll add that COVID also showed how thinly veiled our illusion of order and control and stability really was. And to some degree, it feels as though we're okay with that, and we're letting go of this quest for organization and a reduction of chaos. And that includes the design of our homes. In fact, I see many of today's homes expanding living spaces into the outdoors. And of course, for my interior design friends who are listening along, of course you know that outdoor kitchens, for instance, are surging in popularity. They offer families this unique experience of cooking and dining surrounded by nature, creating this sort of outdoor extension that serves as a bridge, a therapeutic embrace of the outdoors, as well as connecting our consumption of food and nourishment more closely to the source. Against this idyllic pastoral tableau, I think we all know that the extreme minimalism and hard symmetry of the past decade, this so-called classic look, just doesn't resonate as strongly anymore. Or at least, it isn't as interesting as a softer and more unlikely harmony. And yet, if all asymmetry comes from nature, and asymmetry is the closest thing humans recognize to true beauty, then asymmetrical biophilic design makes complete sense, especially in a world where people now desire their homes to be expressions not of organization, but of their vibrant, changing, artistic, natural, and emotional lives. For me, in my furniture, in my art, in interior design, the beauty of asymmetry is that it reflects nature's harmonies. As taught in Zen Buddhism, when the parts aren't exact replicas, they can create their own offset beauty, their own composition. Elements can interact in a way that makes each side equally important. A tree knows when to grow both towards the sun and the water, and in doing so create its own harmony. And finally, asymmetrical design can remind us that we don't need to be mirror perfect. We don't need to be organized, simplified, or purely balanced, but rather that a gentle, flexible harmony in all things is actually a good thing. It's actually just nature's way. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Rebel Nature. Make sure to follow the podcast and make sure to share this with just one person that you think might find this worthwhile. Support for Rebel Nature comes from an affiliate partnership with Blick Art Supplies. Rebel Nature is managed and produced by Quail Run Studios. Original music written and recorded by me. Any commercial music that may have been used in this episode has been licensed for airplay by the Harry Fox Agency, 40 Wall Street, New York, New York. You can learn more about me and my art at ChristopherGrantWard.com.